Momentum behind the push to defund Planned Parenthood continues to gain steam. I'm Matt Barber, Vice President of Liberty Counsel Action. Joining me again in studio is Ron Miller, Associate Dean with Liberty's Helms School of Government. Ron, a number of states, Kansas, Indiana, North Carolina, New Hampshire, Texas, and others are taking up the fight. This is according to FoxNews.com, that the GOP-led House has been unable to finish as of yet. When the White House and the Democratic-controlled Senate risked a government shutdown to protect Planned Parenthood from Republican knives, according to Fox News here, a number of states, unlike in Washington, where Democrats still control two-thirds of government, Republicans are flexing their muscles in states where they made historic gains in legislatures and governors' mansions in last fall's midterm elections. With their new power, Republicans have escalated their fight against abortion and its providers, particularly Planned Parenthood, alarming abortion rights supporters. And Ron, they should be alarmed because states across the country, we've mentioned a number of them here, are getting fed up with Planned Parenthood continuing to slaughter innocent human life, babies in the womb, on the government dole, on the taxpayer dime. And as evidence continues to grow that Planned Parenthood is more than a women's reproductive health provider, is a criminal enterprise, as we see them facilitating sexual abuse throughout Kansas. Investigations have been done across the country. We've seen over and over again cover-ups within Planned Parenthood organizations facilitating sexual abuse. We have seen the books, questionable activity within books around Planned Parenthood. There are a number of issues that have come up that have put Planned Parenthood on the radar here. A number of states are saying we are no longer going to fund Planned Parenthood. Tremendous pushback from the Obama administration on this. But so far, conservative legislators are holding their ground and pushing forward, and we should be encouraged by this.
We should be encouraged, and I also think that we should take a lesson from what we're seeing with regard to the Obama administration's response. Think about this. They are willing to take away all funding from states for medical care for poor people in order to defend the continued funding of Planned Parenthood. What does that tell you about their priorities? That they're willing to compromise the health care for people who can't afford it and who depend on this program just so one organization can get funding, which, quite frankly, it can really make up from donations and other things if it so chose. Because when you look at the federal and state funding for Planned Parenthood, it's not the bulk of their funding. And they make a lot of money from abortions, among many things. And so this is really about exerting their power, their influence. It's about them strong-arming the administration, and then the administration in turn showing that they really don't respond to the people as much as they do to this one special interest group. So I commend the states for what they're doing, and I would hope that they will stand their ground. One thing that does bother me is that the legal opinions that have come against them here and there, and some of those have been overturned, and there are things happening there, seem to think that this is a women's health issue. Mm-hmm. And the fact is, you're talking about an organization that has maybe 800 clinics all over the country, crisis pregnancy centers, which offer many of the same women's health services, mm-hmm. are numbered in the 2,500 to 3,000 or more range, and they're all over the country, and their services are free or nearly free. So we're not talking about a diminution of women's health services when we talk about defunding Planned Parenthood. We're talking about taking aim at an organization that not only does something that's morally objectionable to more than half of the U.S. population, but is so determined to do it that they're willing to break the law in order to make it happen.
Yeah, well said. You're absolutely right. Abortion is what this is all about, and power and control. Abortion is the sacred cow of the left. And anytime there is any pushback on the unfettered access or even taxpayer funding, as we see here, because that's what this essentially is, taxpayer funding of Planned Parenthood. They do a little, some accounting gimmicks and tricks in order to separate the funds. But of course, there's a commingling of funds here. Planned Parenthood gets over $350 million a year in federal taxpayer dollars so that they can carry out their abortion homicide enterprise. And that's what that's what it is. That's what we're talking about here. That's what abortion is. It is the taking of a human life, the intentional taking of a human life. That's homicide. A lot of people, more than half of people do not want to be complicit in abortion homicide, don't want to lend their taxpayer dollars, their hard-earned money, to facilitate the dismembering of a little girl in her mother's womb. This is understandable, and I think legislators in states around the country are finally getting up enough courage to do the right thing here. This again shows us, Ron, that elections matter. We have to elect people who are going to defend life, who are going to vote in favor of life, who are going to represent the values that we as Christians hold near and dear. Elections have consequences. Elections matter. And in states where pro-lifers have been elected to office, something is being done to defend life.
And I think we find that once these things take hold in these states, and once they stand their ground, I think we're going to see other states will be emboldened to do the same. Sometimes it takes people who have the courage to make that first move and to take some of the slings and arrows that come with it. And then when they see that they're still standing and that they've still been able to hold their ground, then others will take up the same battle. And that's what we're hoping to see. What's interesting is that so many years ago, Thomas Jefferson said to compel a man to furnish contributions of money for the propagation of opinions which he disbelieves is sinful and tyrannical. And the point that he was making is that government shouldn't be engaged in active funding of something that is morally objectionable to people within the population. There are things that are happening here where if you're going to have this kind of service, pay for it yourself. Don't make people of faith, don't make people who don't agree with abortion because they believe it's the taking of a human life. And that includes, there are secular people who feel the same way. They understand that, according to medical science, life begins at conception, and that if we're going to protect life in any other stage of development, it needs to be protected there too. Government should not have any role in funding any service that would go against that inalienable right to life.
Or compelling us to fund those services, which is what essentially occurs when you have the government mandate, like the HHS saying that Catholic and Christian organizations have to pay for abortifacients and so forth. That's exactly what Thomas Jefferson, as you point out, spoke against. We've been talking about that earlier in the week. All of this ties together, and again, the debate over life versus so-called freedom of choice, the euphemistic phrase that they use, choice to do what? Choice to kill a baby. I mean, this is what we're talking about here. Yeah. But that's not really what this is all about. It's about power. It's about their worldview and their imposing that secularist worldview on that culture of death on the rest of us under penalty of law. That's what we see happening here. And anytime states like Texas and Kansas and Indiana and other states stand up against that, the federal government, it's a sacred cow, they're coming down with all of the force of federal government in order to try to nip that in the bud, because as you point out, it sets a precedent. It signals other states that might be inclined to do the same thing, but don't want to. They want to sit back and watch and see if the other guy gets it done without taking too many bruises. That they recognize that, and they fear that as well.
And it's not just the force of law. Planned Parenthood has an apparatus out there aided and abetted by the media, and they're pulling out all the stops. We find a challenge to freedom of conscience in this country because it's not enough for you to disagree with someone anymore. If you don't agree with a particular position, they want to intimidate you into silence or submission, and that is a precursor to authoritarianism, and so we need to push back against that as well. Not just what the government's doing, but what the cultural elites are doing as well.
That's the tactic of the left in all of its various forms, with all its various isms: intimidation, silencing dissent, and intimidating those who disagree into agreement and into forced behavior, into acquiescing to their demands. Liberty Counsel will not stand for it. Liberty Counsel will not be intimidated, and we will push back. We will fight back on your behalf. Go to lc.org or call us at 800-671-1776. Join Liberty Counsel today.